This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is September 25th, and it's just me, producer Pat. We did return to regular panel shows for a couple of weeks, but COVID cases have risen here, and so we're taking things week by week now. Today we have two segments for you. The majority of the show will be an exploration of Jeff Bezos' wealth by Darren, who was with Adam when he recorded it. Before that, though, I guess we need to talk about Cuties. This lands in the controversies bucket of TRC's mandate. I'll talk about the film, but I'll also do my best to avoid any spoilers here. Cuties is a 2020 coming-of-age film written and directed by Maimouna Doucouré. The story revolves around an 11-year-old girl named Ami, who, like the film's director, is the daughter of Senegalese immigrants who moved to a working-class Parisian neighborhood. Ami is caught between the traditional conservative values of her Muslim upbringing and an internet culture of TikTok celebrities and viral fame. She becomes interested in a group of girls who call themselves Cuties and are practicing for a local dance competition. Soon Ami becomes part of the crew, choreographing twerks and other suggestive dance moves. Now, you've probably heard of this film, and likely not because it was well received at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, where Doucouré won the Director Award. No, it's probably because of all the controversy ahead of it being released on Netflix earlier this month. On social media, accusations that the film promoted the sexualization of children were swift and vicious. Netflix was accused of promoting pedophilia. A number of petitions were started online to have the film removed from Netflix, while others threatened to cancel their subscription to the service if it wasn't. People who hadn't seen the film swarmed IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes to leave bad reviews. Some political figures also condemned the film. Senator Ted Cruz wrote U.S. Attorney General William Barr asking the government to pursue whether Netflix had broken federal laws. A letter was sent directly to the CEO of Netflix from 4 attorneys general calling for the removal of Cuties. Here in Canada, Member of Parliament Bob Zimmer spoke out against the film, saying on Twitter, quote, "As a father of 4, I'm appalled and disgusted. Netflix, you need to put a stop to this now." Then opposition leader Erin O'Toole spoke out on Twitter, quote, "I'm a dad who's deeply disturbed by this Netflix show. Childhood is a time of innocence. We must do more to protect our children. This show is exploitative and wrong." The film's director received a number of attacks on social media, including numerous death threats, and according to subscription analytics firm Antenna, Netflix cancellation surged 5 times the normal amount following the release of the movie. Okay, so I watched Cuties this week. To be sure, there are some difficult scenes to watch in this movie. These are children, and the director uses uncomfortable images to provoke a conversation about the sexualization of girls and the effect of social media on kids. She shows what it looks like for young girls to emulate the things that they see on the internet. For some reason, I was reminded of the book, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret by Judy Blume. I found my older sister's copy of this book on the bookshelf and read it when I was 13 years old. I wasn't the right audience for that book, and I'm not sure that I was the right audience for Cuties. I probably wouldn't have finished watching it if I wasn't going to talk about it on the show. Incidentally, I saw that there's work underway to make Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret into a film, and I have to wonder how much backlash that film will get. One thing I can say about having watched the movie is that the intention seems to be to criticize the very things critics are accusing the film of, the sexualization of children, and that point may have gotten lost in the storm. In the director's own words, quote, "Spend an hour on social media and you'll see preteens, often in makeup, pouting their lips, strutting their stuff as if they were grown women. The problem, of course, is that they are not women, and they don't seem to realize what they are doing. They construct their self-esteem based on social media likes and the number of followers that they have." To me, it seems clear that this movie would not have gotten on very many people's radar if it weren't for something other than the movie itself, Netflix's marketing of the film. They promoted the release of the film with a poster showing the young girls from the film in suggestive dance poses. This choice of poster contrasts with the French poster for the theatrical release, which shows the same group of girls having fun while carrying shopping bags. Doucouré said she only became aware of the Netflix poster for the film at the same time as the public. The original Netflix synopsis of the film read, Ami, 11, becomes fascinated with a twerking dance crew. Hoping to join them, she starts to explore her femininity, defying her family's traditions. They have since changed that to 11-year-old Ami starts to rebel against her conservative family's traditions when she becomes fascinated with a free-spirited dance crew. Netflix apologized. In a tweet on August 20th, they wrote, "We're deeply sorry for the inappropriate artwork that we used for Cuties. It was not okay. Nor was it representative of this French film which won an award at Sundance. We've now updated the pictures and description." Note that I mentioned that tweet was on August 20th. The film was released on Netflix on September 9th. So much of this backlash is from people who did not and could not have seen the film. Cuties is not for everyone. To be sure, I found it a hard movie to watch. That said, in my opinion, much of the criticism is misguided and based on the Netflix poster and description. This is the equivalent of judging a book by its cover. And with that, I'll turn you over to Adam and Darren. I hope everyone out there is staying safe, and we will talk to you soon.
Hi everyone, Adam and Darren here, giving you another segment. I'm going to explore whether Jeff Bezos is too rich. Jeffrey Preston Bezos is the founder and CEO of Amazon. Perhaps you've heard of this company.
Yeah.
Bezos has been described as the world's richest person since 2017, and Forbes said he is the first person in history to have a net worth exceeding $200 billion.
Wow.
Wow, that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Quick aside, it is actually possible a Saudi prince or even Vladimir Putin has more money, but that's for another segment for another show.
It's just harder to verify. Is that the issue?
Exactly.
Okay.
What can $200 billion buy? Let's think about the things people often want in life. Their homes, car, food, clothing, vacations. And let's enjoy this. Let's let our imaginations run a little wild, overestimate, and do some math. Everyone likes math, including Adam.
I love math.
Everyone needs a nice home, right? Well, why don't we give Jeff Bezos a nice $100 million home? I think he actually has one that's worth $115, but we're going to say $100 million.
Sure.
And why don't we give him 2 additional homes at $50 million each? And then why not 10 more $10 million homes? And then 20 $5 million homes. And we'll toss in $100 million for upkeep and maintenance. So those 33 homes make up $500 million. What about cars? Well, let's pretend Bezos is more like Jay Leno. How about 10 $1 million cars and 100 $1 million cars? Well, that's only $200 million there. Well, how about a $200 million private plane? Okay, and a $400 million yacht, which he does own. And $100 million for other craft like helicopters, jetpacks, whatever. I don't know. Maybe the yacht comes with a helicopter. Here's another one. And another $100 million for upkeep. So that's $1 billion. So now we're at $1.5 billion. We still have $188.5 billion to go.
Wow.
He has 33 homes and many cars. All right, well, what else do people do? Well, they eat. So what about food? Well, many poor people eat with only $700 a year in expenses.
Wow.
Well, many in our richer countries, we probably spend $3,000 to $10,000 a year on food per person. Let's say Bezos somehow spends $10,000 a day on food. That's $3.6 million. Let's say he does this for 30 years. Well, that's $100 million. Now, clothing. I don't know if there's expensive nanotech out there in terms of like wearable materials or he has in his own Iron Man suit, but let's imagine Bezos has 0 articles of clothing and he spends $800,000 over the next year on everything he'd need and $200,000 in the future. You got to keep up with the future styles, right?
Yeah, for sure. That's
only $1 million on clothing. Vacations. He works a lot, so he probably doesn't take many conventional vacations. He also has his own plane. That $400 million yacht, so he can get places. But let's picture somewhere fancy that costs, I don't know, $100,000 a day. Let's say he vacations 30 days a year. That's $3 million. So that was $104 million for food, clothing, and vacation, which drops the $198.5 billion to $198.396 billion. So that means, even with all these purchases, and imagining he spends another $300 million on whatever he wants, we haven't spent 1% of his wealth. This is absurd. But more than that, is it wrong? Is it morally wrong? Should it be illegal? There are many complaints Jeff Bezos is too rich. And some of those complaints do what I just did. They provide a list of what he could buy. It's both fun and disgusting all at the same time. It's like, wow, that's only $1 million. How do you spend millions of dollars? It certainly does seem absurd that one person should have so much money while there are literally people starving to death. And I personally think he should be donating to charity a lot more, and especially effective charities. But let's look into it. First, I think some people think Jeff Bezos has this in liquid money. Perhaps like Scrooge McDuck swimming
Yes.
around in a large mess, which Adam covered on a previous show.
Can we do the math of how big that money winner would be? I think it would be pretty big.
Oh, wow. Meaning he could easily access it and spend it. This is not true.
No.
His wealth is almost entirely due to his Amazon stock. Amazon is currently worth about $1.5 trillion.
Wow.
So that's why Bezos has so much net wealth at the moment. He has, I think 11% of stock. He used to be 16, divorced with the wife, that sort of thing, but it's still pretty up there.
Pretty expensive.
He also has about $3 billion in Google stock, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It helps if you search for Amazon using Google. Bezos does and could sell some Amazon stock, but if he suddenly sold all of it to make it liquid, it would then probably cause the value to decrease, perhaps even plummet, and then he'd actually have less money depending on how quickly he sold it.
I'd never be able to buy all his houses.
No, he already owns them. Anyone who owns stock or has played poker for money knows that you don't really have the money until you settle up or sell the stock. If your stock goes up, you haven't made any money until you sell it.
Yeah.
I made this much. No, you didn't. Did you sell it? Then you don't have it. There's a life lesson for everyone. All right. Second, surprise, surprise, Bezos wasn't always rich. He was not born a 200 billionaire.
He was born a 100 billion.
Yeah, exactly. He earned the rest with a loan from his $100 billion parents. He was 33 when he first became a millionaire, which was in 1997, after raising $54 million through Amazon's initial public offering. But then, bam, 2 years later, he was a billionaire. That's some growth.
Wow.
And this is quoting Wikipedia. He was first included on the Forbes World's Billionaires list in 1999 with a registered net worth of $10.1 billion. Amazing.
Yeah.
A year later, his net worth decreased to $6.1 billion, 40%.
Rough.
His wealth plummeted even more the following year, dropping 66% to $2 billion. And he lost $500 million the following year, which brought his net worth down to $1.5 billion. So you're 1999, you're feeling fine, you're partying like it's 1999 at $10 billion. 3 years later, you're down to 1.5.
Interesting.
That's a hit, right? And also it's over the year-over-year losses.
And I was buying a lot of anime DVDs during those years.
You were doing your best.
So I don't really know what his excuse is.
Imagine the counterfactual if you hadn't been. Now, the following year, his net worth increased to $2.5 billion. And from 2005 to 2007, he quadrupled his net worth to $8.7 billion. And after the financial crisis and succeeding economic recession, net worth decreased to $6.8 billion. And on it goes. I'm not going to go through every year. The gist is it went down, up, down, up. It's generally been going up these past years, but some early years had some big downtimes.
Obviously, the pandemic's helping him a bit.
At the moment, yes. So sometimes Jeff Bezos will lose, this is in quotes, right, because he doesn't actually have the money, $10 billion in a week, and I think there usually isn't that much coverage of that.
Yeah.
Oh, he's so rich. He just lost $10 billion.
Wow.
Right. Now, I don't have the time or knowledge, quite frankly, to go into detailed explanation of Bezos' dedication to creating Amazon, its business model, and so on. But clearly, this is someone who was determined to see something happen. He could have sold early and been a millionaire. He could have called it quits when he lost $8 billion in net worth in the 2 years around 2001, but he didn't. Amazon almost went bankrupt, but he was able to borrow and rally. Hard work and luck. Doesn't seem so lucky that when he was born, his mom was 17 years old, a high school student, and his father was a bike shop owner. She later married someone else, and his parents were able to lend him $300,000 to help start Amazon, which does seem lucky.
Yeah.
It also seems he was very smart, which is a bit of luck and hard work.
Sure.
And yes, as Adam mentioned, Bezos benefited greatly from the pandemic, and in a way that is lucky, but it might be better to describe it as his company provided a service that many people wanted, and in a time when they really wanted it, the service was there.
Yes.
And they chose to financially support Amazon. So how do we think about this? Well, if someone wins the lottery, very few people hate them, aside from jealousy. But they don't morally think, well, that person has to donate to charity. I've never heard almost anyone say that about a lottery winner.
Sure.
The big ones, especially in the States, have hundreds of millions of dollars. No one seems to criticize the winners.
Yeah.
Why? They were just lucky. Now, Bezos was also lucky, but he had a vision, put in hard work, and took risks and worked for decades.
Sure.
But we don't think he's lucky. Well, maybe this is because Amazon mistreats its workers.
Maybe
Right?
part of it.
Well, we'll find out. So this leads us to 3. Is Amazon mistreating its workers? And or capitalism is the problem?
Sure. Sure.
Now, from what I've read, it certainly seems that Amazon could pay its workers more and provide some better working conditions. And they actually responded to public pressure and increased wages.
That's good.
Are workers paid a market wage proportional to their skill and what the company needs? Probably in the general sense. Does it still seem absurd that someone working at Amazon makes so little money when he makes so much money? It does seem absurd, But does that mean it should be changed? And here where it gets pretty tricky. And this is maybe the issue is capitalism itself, or maybe just because of the massive inequality. Now, first, I'm guessing all the people who buy stuff from Amazon don't really care about this issue. Or perhaps they just can't help themselves and they do care and they feel guilty about it.
Sure.
Now, second, there is certainly some evidence that inequality is bad for societies, for sure.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it is easy to fix. Everything's got a pro and a con. Amazon, like seemingly every large company, has been accused of tax avoidance and anti-competitive practices. I think they're probably likely guilty of some of this from what I understand about how companies function.
Sure.
Antitrust concerns did break up Microsoft, so perhaps that is what some people want for Amazon. Now, I don't really know enough about how this would actually work, and I'm not sure it would be viable because it's not quite the same thing at all. I'm also not here to defend Amazon, but rather to point out that it seems to me there isn't a simple legal or regulatory or policy solution to address the supposed problem. If there was, it's tempting to think it would have already been tried. I do want to mention that I'm out of my domain of expertise. I really don't know about, we'll say, financial management across nations and governments and so on. So perhaps there is something obvious and politically viable that I'm unaware of that would actually work. If so, please write in. And I'm being sincere. Maybe you have a great idea. I haven't seen one. Mm-hmm. I generally think the issue is as follows, and this is why it's so hard to address. Let's assume there's a particular problem with Amazon, whatever it is. And then you try to come up with a way to address that problem. Now, not only is it hard to come up with something, because this may cause complications or negative issues in a different domain, but you also have to imagine you're up against, say, 10 times as many people who are just as smart, if not smarter, than you, and they have just as many resources to combat your initiative. Mm-hmm. You could say, well, the government could increase the tax on marginal gains, or the highest marginal tax rate, and they've done that in the past, and people have advocated for that, but it doesn't seem to happen that much. Certainly when other parties in power, they might raise a little bit. And then as for a larger estate tax, which could have an effect here, the U.S. seems to have little appetite for that, because you have to convince the public of all these things, right?
Are we talking about like a tax on capital itself, or what does that mean, the estate tax?
Oh, estate tax is also known as the death tax.
Oh, so inheritance.
Correct, yes. Inheritance tax, yes. The government just taking money by fiat is a complete non-starter, even though I think some very left people think this is a good idea. Like, well, once you reach a certain amount, we'll just take some. Like, well, I don't think that's how it works.
Yeah.
Same with having specific labor rules for one company that has done well and not the competitors. It's like, so once you become so rich, you now have to pay people a lot more, even though if they went to find a job elsewhere with their skill set, they wouldn't be able to do it. I mean, I certainly understand the sentiment, but I don't think that really works, right? Now,
didn't work in Atlas Shrugged, so I don't know.
That was fiction, Adam. We're in the real world.
Anti-dog rules or whatever it was, yeah.
Now, Seattle, at least certain people they work in the government of Seattle, do not like Bezos whatsoever, and they passed a tax bill to target Amazon and Bezos. If you make so much money, you're going to get taxed. But Bezos' take-home salary is actually only $80,000. So this particular law did not even apply to him.
80,000, yeah. Well, this is where you can have progressive taxes on income, and that's not the problem, so to speak. That's not where wealth is concentrated.
Right. Now, Amazon as a company may actually have to pay more in payroll taxes for higher earners because of this law from Seattle.
Sure.
But lawyers and tax loopholes is often how the world works, and the United States tax code is very complicated, and people can offshore all sorts of stuff and have things that I don't know about, but people are paid $1,000 an hour to figure out.
Yeah.
Now, for the reasonable people who dislike Bezos and Amazon, I'm guessing that they probably still want something like Amazon to exist. You still want to be able to have people to buy stuff online, right? So is it every company using Shopify to have their own sort of system, some intermediary? eBay doesn't quite do it because we want new products, because Amazon both manufactures and distributes. So then are you like, is it Walmart? Like what is it, right? What's next?
Yeah. Well, I think some people would just like to have more support for smaller companies, right? Amazon is too big, Walmart's too big.
Right.
These people shouldn't exist.
Right.
And mom and pops, it's not sustainable, but I think that's the idea.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic. The problem is you have to convince everyone else to not do what they want to do.
Yeah,
and
people
in a free society, that's what you get. Oh, Amazon makes it easy. It's an interface I like. I'm familiar. I have the one touch, one click, whatever it is. So Amazon has made Bezos very rich, but it has also made over $1 trillion for other people and provide many of us with packages and even food, right?
And streaming video.
So it's to say that it's not like Bezos has done nothing with his money, because the creation of Amazon itself has provided value to the world. Yeah. Now, also, when I said people have made $1 trillion, and only if they sold their stock. Once again, no one's made any money.
Sure.
So, okay, you might hear all that and say, yeah, but come on, can't he donate more money? What has he done? Well, Bezos has donated to help cancer and press freedom, but in June 2017, he posted on Twitter the following, quote, "I'm thinking about a philanthropy strategy that is the opposite of how I mostly spend my time, working on the long term," end quote. Now, people wrote back saying, like, why don't you pay our workers more? How about that?
Sure.
But there were some other suggestions, and I guess he then reflected on how he might do these sorts of things. And this is from the Wikipedia article linked in the show notes at trcpodcast.com.
Great website.
In January 2018, Bezos made a $33 million donation to thedream.us, a college scholarship fund for undocumented immigrants brought to the United States as minors. In June 2018, Bezos donated to Breakthrough Energy Ventures, a private philanthropic fund founded by Bill Gates aimed at promoting emissions-free energy. In September 2018, Bezos donated $10 million to With Honor, a nonpartisan organization that works to increase the number of veterans in political office. Also in September 2018, Bezos indicated he would focus on American homelessness and preschool for low-income communities, creating a $2 billion fund to address both of those.
$2 billion. Wow.
And in February 2020, Bezos pledged $10 billion to combat climate change through the Bezos Earth Fund.
Wow.
And he also donated $100 million to food banks through the Feeding America during the COVID-19 pandemic. Are these the most effective donations he could make? Well, EA Darren says probably not. But the evidence isn't in on most of them. And yes, a lot of them are American-centric, and that's how it's going to be. Yeah. Bezos hasn't signed the Gates pledge to give away a lot of his income, but it seems like he's close to donating $13 billion, which is not nothing.
No, it's not
and that's actually 5 to 10% of his wealth, depending on when you might calculate this. Mm-hmm. So as I said, I think he should donate more. It is immoral to me that someone has so much, and let's be honest, so much they don't really use, while others suffer and die. But I should also mention, I feel the same way about myself. Of course, I have far less money than Jeff Bezos. I only spend $9,000 a day on food. But I have basically won the lottery compared to a couple billion people on Earth. Sure. So when we judge him, let's make sure we look in the mirror too. Things are further complicated if Bezos plans to donate his money later. That tweet and other things, you can sort of infer that's what he's going to do, but since he hasn't signed the Gates pledge, why don't you sign the pledge, make it a bit more legit?
So anyway. What's the idea? Like 20 billion now might be 40 billion in the future and it'll have a bigger impact?
So if he's going to give most of it away later, one of the issues is whether it's a matter of the giving options now are better than later. And the EA community, that is certainly debatable. Yeah. Also, given Amazon stock, he might actually be able to give more by waiting. Yeah. For example, if Bezos cashed out years ago in 2008 when he had $8 billion, and then say he invested it normally and did well, and maybe he has $20, $30 billion, he could have only donated that $8 billion, or that it grew to 20 or 30. Mm-hmm. But by not cashing out, he can now easily donate another $12 billion on top of the pledged $12 billion he's just donated without affecting his life or probably even the Amazon stock price much at all. And so you're like, well, what he should do is sell his stock and then invest it in Amazon. And then, and then when he gets even more money, donate that, right?
Yeah, it's tricky.
Okay. So is Bezos too rich? As usual, I'm pushing for precise definitions when we try to answer a question. Mm-hmm. What does too mean? What is rich? What's a Bezos? No. In some ways, the answer does seem to be yes. But because actions to address it might have more negative counter effects, perhaps the answer is no.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Darren. I mean, I've seen a lot of people complain about Jeff Bezos being rich, and part of it kind of bothers me because, what's the alternative? It's communism? Like, what's the extreme here? And it's hard to say he deserves it. He worked hard. It's nice that he's able to profit from it. The flip side of that is obviously a lot of people work hard and they scrape by a fraction of what he has, right? And I don't think I have a perfect answer to that, right? Like, progressive tax policies are all great and good, but it doesn't really seem to apply in this situation. If the money's mostly still in his company, he's not, he's not using it to make a huge gold-plated statue of himself, right? So it's
just a $400 million yacht.
Yeah. So
which may or may not have a gold-plated statue on site. We don't know. We can't verify this.
Yeah. So is that wasteful? Maybe, but it's a fraction of his wealth, right? And where does that end up going? And who, what jobs does it support to buy and maintain that yacht? I don't know. It's all complicated. It's all part of the economy, right? So
here's another. So I think this is useful to talk about because it does seem like some sort of marginal tax increase, especially on capital gains. Even Warren Buffett has said this. Like, I pay less in taxes than my secretary. That's ridiculous. But when you start to think about the larger moves, it's sort of this survivorship bias that people are looking at. Because I had a friend. He's like, well, can't we just tax these really profitable companies? You're like, so many companies fail though.
Yeah.
And some of them have really small profit margins. Yeah. I think what we want is somehow, if the company makes lots of money, they just have to give some of it to people who are poor. But it's so hard to implement anything like that in any practical sense, in any legal sense, in any politically viable sense. It's just not that viable. It doesn't mean nothing can be done. It doesn't mean we should advocate for these things. I'm just trying to highlight that complexities abound. Here's another quirky way of thinking about it. So Jeff Bezos has $200 billion.
Yep.
Let's say at $100 billion. What's the way to look at how absurd this is? If you have $100,000 and you spend $1, you're like, well, I got $100,000. I'm not going to worry about $1. If you have $100 billion and you spend $1 million, it's like you spending $1 on something if you have $100,000.
That's wild.
It's absurd.
It's like walking through the grocery store and being like, these popsicles are $800 million. I guess I'll buy them. I didn't really factor.
I try not to look at anything under $1 million. I just don't need the cognitive load.
Yeah. And I think another way of looking at it is like, okay, let's say the government taxed Jeff Bezos $100 billion. Maybe they could use it to start a war. Like, who's to say that that's going to go to a great place?
We haven't raised this, and Canadians, we're trying to be too smug, but given the American political system, I think it'd be harder to argue that they really know how to invest the money better than someone who might be doing it in private ways. Not sure, because certainly we think broad government support, at least in Canada and other so-called developed countries, does help the population. But yes, a welfare state is certainly a debate for another time.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think we all kind of want our billionaires to be as philanthropic and rational about it as Bill Gates or someone like that, right? And not everyone is.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, and until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Cuboids.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter @TRC_podcast.